Don Cornelius quotes, and I will be quoting him probably again before the time is through in time. 70s, 80s, just the best music, period, during which the best soul music was created and the best records made. What do I say about that quote? I concur. Now, 60s had the start of some of the greatest singles artists ever. You had the importance of Motown, British Invasion, Jimi Hendrix Express, Sign of Family Stone, James Brown, etc. You had a lot of greatness come out there. And then the 90s was what I call the last era of the music because before technology took over, that was the last of the era of music created, even though it did rely on the past. So the 90s does come with an asterisk, but it was still the last era, but it comes with an asterisk. And after that, it ain't nothing but digital and just basically ringtone and just bop, 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 bop. And I love the music 20s through the 50s. They had distinctiveness. But for me, there was something about the 70s and 80s for the modernization, the groove, the musicianship, the album oriented artists, acts that were able to reinvent the wheel and change the music. And no one did it more than R&B did it. Because R&B was so strong that acts, when I talk about yacht rock, for instance, the groove on that, those California-based records were like emulating what happened with R&B. See, everything is like an imitation of what R&B did. Even then, with that, you don't think about it, but think about those grooves. They were low key grooves based. When you had rock, pop acts, white acts that did disco and wanted to add funk into the music, i.e., the Rolling Stones, i.e., Kiss, i.e., Pink Floyd, i.e., Rod Stewart, i.e., Cher, they went for the grooves. That was the influence. The impact of black music and what it has done and the influence is just amazing. And those records that were produced. And if we go into the 70s, we still had Motown records, we had Stax records, we had Philadelphia International. We had some incredible bands. We go from Earth, Wind, and Fire, Palmer and Funkadelic, the Isley Brothers, the Commodores, the Bar-Kays, Confunction, Kool and the Gang, Frankie Beverly and Mays. You know, you had Tower Power, War, Mandrill. You know, you had all that coming. Cameo later, Rick James later. You know, think about it. You had the Jacksons, Michael Jackson before he going solo, the whole Jackson 5, that phenomenon. You had so much competition, so many acts before they got to reinvent their wheel. You had Barry White, Isaac Hayes, Curtis Mayfield, Bill Withers, you know, Stein Family Stone still. So you had all this going on. Donna Summer, Donna Ross, Aretha Franklin's Dominance, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Minnie Riperton, Lady Natalie Cole. You know, you had all this going on. Phyllis Hyman, Angela Bofield, etc., etc., etc. Jazz, funk, fusion, Donald Byrd, what Miles Davis was doing, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, Ray Parker Jr., Michael Henderson. Versatility, everybody going around, Brothers Johnson, etc., etc. Billy Preston. See, it's a who's who. The Mitchell brothers, you know, when I think about what the 70s did, Willie Hutch, etc., think about the 70s did Roy Ayers, you know. You go through all that. Ohio Plays, Junie Morris, and all that. You think about all that 70s and 80s. That's where Soul Train was in its peak and its prime. And Don Cornelius told the truth because think about all the sampling and the looping. How did the acts build their boutique labels? How did those acts blow up? They lived off the backs of those records that came out from those eras. You know, take James Brown, P-Funk, Sly and the Family Stone, Rick James stuff out of it. How them hip hop records look. You just got to think about it from that perspective. So he ain't lying because that was a very competitive Roger and Zab and all that. You know, all that was a competitive era. You know, you had a very strong era of music being made. And those eras represented not only, you know, when you think about this. Chic's Good Times became Rapper's Delight for the Sugar Hill Gang. Think about that one song and that bass and that groove and what that implied. The changing of the guard. That's uncanny, unimaginable. But that happened all in that era, in that whole era, and that whole thing. The music, the flip, the whole thing. So when you listen to that era produced so much great talent, great music, competition. There were tears to this. You could take a third, fourth tier act from back then, they would mop the floor what's out today. That's how steep the competition was. I remember Ron Isley was talking about that, and that's a fact. That's not to say they haven't been great acts from the 90s and so on and so forth, but let me tell you something. They had heavy-handed comp back then, and R&B was doing the thing because it had the church in it, it had the gospel in it, it had the funk, had the poetic nature of even like a Gil Scott Heron. You had artists that you could even put, but they were representing. They had no titles. They was just bringing the grooves. They were bringing things that made you move. And Don Cornelius was right. The 70s and the 80s produced the best. Especially, I would say like the mid 80s. I would say the 70s, no doubt. Because I don't think the 70s need any help. I think it's just that strong. But let me know what you think. Please like, subscribe, welcome thoughts, comments, and I do respond. Thank you. Wash your hands. Keep your mind clear. Watch out for another. Share it if you like. Stay safe, stay blessed, stay woke, stay free. I'm out one time. Peace.